Have you ever stopped to question why you do the things you do? Why you react a certain way when someone compliments you or when they ignore you? Why you obsess over being seen, admired, validated? Why you feel that strange, quiet ache when you're alone, even when everything on the outside seems fine? It's not just emotion, not just insecurity, and it's not random. What if there's something beneath all that, beneath your words, your choices, your routines? Something ancient, something primal, that's been guiding you without your permission. What if you've been obeying a force you don't even recognize? A force that lives not in your conscious mind, but in the shadows of your psyche. Carl Jung called it the unconscious, but that word doesn't do it justice, because what he was pointing to wasn't just a mental filing cabinet of forgotten memories. It was a living presence, a pulse beneath the surface, a silent architect of your thoughts, your relationships, your fears, your needs. And one of the strongest forces hiding there is sex. Not the act, not the fantasy, not even desire, as you typically understand it. We're talking about sex as a symbol, as psychic energy, as an invisible thread that pulls at your decisions, your habits, your sense of identity, without you ever noticing. We've been taught to think of sex as something external, physical, taboo. But Jung saw it as internal, sacred, foundational. You think your ambitions are about success. They might be about being seen. You think your politeness is about manners. It might be about being liked. You think your loneliness is just a phase. It might be the result of denying a part of yourself that's been screaming to be acknowledged. And the irony, the more you ignore it, the more it controls you. Why do you pick the clothes you wear? Why do you lower your voice when you speak to someone you're attracted to? Why do you feel that pang of emptiness when you scroll through social media, seeing others loved, desired, chosen? It's not just social pressure. It's not just habit. It's the whisper of something deeper, a force that doesn't ask for your permission and doesn't care about your logic. Jung believed that every person wears a mask. He called it the persona. It's the face you show the world, the polished version of yourself, the one who's agreeable, put together, respectable. But behind the persona lies the shadow, the part of you that you've hidden, denied, or never fully understood. And within that shadow is often your repressed erotic energy, your true desires, your raw impulses, your unfiltered truth. You see, most people think they're in control of their lives. They think they're making choices freely. But if you've never faced your shadow, you're not choosing. You're reacting. You're compensating. You're constructing a version of yourself that's designed to avoid rejection, judgment, abandonment. But that version isn't real. It's a survival strategy. And deep down, you know it. Because at night when the noise fades, and you're finally alone with yourself, there's a silence that speaks. There's an ache you can't explain. There's a discomfort that doesn't go away, no matter how many achievements you collect, or smiles you wear. That's the unconscious. That's the shadow. That's the buried erotic force calling your name. And the longer you run from it, the more fragmented you become. You start to feel like a stranger in your own skin. You start to wonder why your relationships fail, why your dreams feel hollow, why no amount of validation ever feels like enough. But what if I told you that all of this, your hunger, your shame, your confusion, could be traced back to one truth? That you have denied a part of yourself so completely, you've forgotten it ever existed. This isn't a video about sex. It's a video about power, about freedom, about identity. It's a confrontation with everything you've buried to fit in, to survive, to be loved. Because when Jung spoke of sex, he wasn't talking about scandal. He was talking about transformation. He was saying the part of you that you fear the most holds the key to your wholeness. And if you never face it, it will run your life from the dark, while you keep pretending you're free. So ask yourself, honestly, have you been living your life, or just performing a version of yourself that makes everyone else comfortable? Because once you start to see this force for what it really is, not shameful, not vulgar, but sacred, you realize something devastating. You haven't been in control, but you could be. What if the force you've spent years trying to suppress was never meant to be silenced, but understood? What if your discomfort wasn't a flaw, but a message? Not from society, not from others, but from your own self, buried deep below the surface. Because this is where Carl Jung leads us, not into morality, not into restraint, but into revelation. He said, "What you do not make conscious will manifest as fate." And what he meant is this: the more you refuse to look inward, the more you surrender to the unconscious, and let it write your story, without your awareness. Jung saw libido, yes, the same word Freud used, but he saw it differently. For Freud, libido was sexual in a narrow sense. For Jung, libido was everything. It was the river beneath the psyche. It wasn't just about sex. It was the energy of creation, the engine of transformation, the inner fire that could either consume you or illuminate you. And here's what most people get wrong. They think repression equals strength. They think ignoring temptation makes them evolved. They think dressing modestly, acting normal, staying within the lines, makes them free. But it doesn't. It makes them split, fragmented, half awake, torn between the person they are and the persona they perform. Because what you repress doesn't disappear. It festers, it mutates. It hides behind habits, behind addictions, behind obsessions and control. It slips into your relationships as jealousy. It stains your spirituality with hypocrisy. It poisons your ambitions with emptiness, and you don't even know it's there. You think your fear of rejection is about being unloved. It's not. It's about being undiscovered. It's about hiding the raw part of you that longs to be seen, not for your resume, not for your smile, but for your intensity, your truth, your untamed edge. And when you deny that part of yourself long enough, you don't just lose it, you become a prisoner to it. Think about this. Why do some of your relationships feel like patterns? Same arguments, different faces, same pull, same pain, same collapse. Why do you keep chasing validation, even after you succeed? Why does the applause feel hollow the moment the room goes silent? Why does love feel so fleeting, and loneliness so permanent? It's not coincidence. It's unconscious separation. It's libido, unrecognized, unclaimed, repressed, finding ways to break through the cracks. And here's where Jung's warning becomes terrifyingly clear. The libido that you ignore doesn't vanish. It becomes your destiny. You'll chase people who reflect what you deny. You'll sabotage what brings you joy. You'll get stuck in cycles that feel cursed, when in truth they are scripts. Scripts written by the part of you that you've never dared to meet. But let's go deeper. Because this isn't just about inner chaos. This is about the illusion of control. You see, the ego, the part of you that wants to be seen as good, normal, successful, is terrified of your erotic energy. Because Eros doesn't obey. Eros doesn't wait in line. Eros doesn't care about social etiquette or institutional values. It is wild. It is sacred. It is creative chaos. And here's the truth no one wants to hear. That chaos is where your freedom lives. Not in becoming reckless, but in becoming honest. If you never touch that energy, never listen to what it's trying to tell you, you'll live your life as an echo of what's expected, an echo of what's accepted, never the original sound. Jung believed this energy was alchemical, that within libido, when understood, not denied, was the potential for transformation. He compared it to turning lead into gold, not by escaping desire, but by refining it, by channeling it. You don't have to act on every desire, but you do have to listen, because if you don't, the cost is high. It shows up as anxiety you can't explain, as rage you can't control, as ambition that never satisfies, as a life that looks good on the outside and feels hollow on the inside. And the worst part, no one will know. You'll look perfectly fine. You'll smile in every photo. You'll answer "I'm good" every time someone asks. And yet, something will always feel missing. That missing thing is not a person, not a job, not a lifestyle. It's the part of you that you buried to be accepted. And until you bring it into the light, you'll live as a ghost in your own story. There's a moment in life that creeps up slowly, It doesn't come with a bang or a breakdown. It comes in the quiet, a glance in the mirror that lingers too long, a conversation that feels hollow, a success that should have made you proud, but doesn't. You start to feel it, not as a crisis, but as a question: who am I really living for? Most people don't answer that question, because answering it requires dismantling a life they've carefully built, out of fear, performance, survival. It means peeling back the layers of identity. It means risking the only version of themselves they know how to present. But here's what Carl Jung knew: that beneath all those layers, beneath the status, the perfection, the moral stories we tell ourselves, there is something burning, and it is not evil. It is not shameful. It is not something to suppress. It is eros, not just sex, not even desire, in the ordinary sense, but a force, a vibration, a call toward connection, creation and authenticity. And when it's buried for too long, it doesn't die, it becomes distorted. You've seen it, in people who can't stop chasing attention, in people who are obsessed with control, with performance, with validation, in the ones who have everything, except peace. They're not weak, they're not broken, they're just split, disconnected from something they never knew they were allowed to understand. Because we were never taught to honor our erotic energy, we were taught to fear it, to silence it, to dress it up in virtue or hide it in shame. And so it leaked out in other ways, in our ambitions, our anxieties, our addictions. You might think your need to achieve is about purpose. It might be about longing. You might think your obsession with productivity is discipline. It might be a substitute for intimacy. You might think your commitment to a perfect image is strength. It might be fear, fear of being seen as you really are, wild, emotional, raw, desiring. Jung called this the danger of repression, because when we deny eros, we also deny what makes us human, and eventually that denial becomes an identity. We play roles, we become the good boy, the respectable woman, the spiritual guide. But behind the mask, something aches, something watches us live, and waits. The truth is, you don't lose your power because of desire. You lose it because you're pretending you don't have any. Jung saw this again and again: patients who came in with depression, with anxiety, with chronic dissatisfaction. And beneath all their symptoms was the same root: disconnection from eros, not just in sex, but in life, in creativity, in passion, in the ability to feel alive. We've all been taught that desire leads us astray. But what if denying it does more damage? Because eros, when ignored, doesn't fade. It becomes obsession. It becomes manipulation. It becomes self-sabotage. You chase people not to love them, but to feel something through them. You chase success not to express yourself, but to be seen, envied, desired. And the moment you get it, you feel nothing, because it was never about them. It was never about the prize. It was about the part of you you're still avoiding, the part of you that's hungry to be whole. Jung said that most people confuse self-control with spiritual bypassing. They think not wanting is maturity, but real maturity isn't about erasing desire. It's about integrating it, without letting it rule you, and without pretending it doesn't exist. So here's a truth that might sting. You don't need to act on every desire, but you need to face where it's coming from. If you don't, you'll live a life of rehearsals. You'll fall in love with mirrors, not people. You'll seek approval from those who reflect your unclaimed shadow. You'll perform until you forget what it ever felt like to just be. The next time you feel that unexpected pull toward someone, that spark, that tension, pause. Don't moralize it. Don't suppress it. Don't act on it blindly, either. Just ask, what is this pointing to inside me? What am I really seeking? Because that question, that single moment of awareness, is the start of everything. It's the start of truth, and truth is the only thing that can break the pattern. Not affirmation, not perfection, not success, just truth. So what happens when you finally look inward? When you stop blaming the world, your ex, your upbringing, your job, your luck, and turn toward the part of you that's been whispering all along? What happens is silence. Not peace, not at first, but silence, the kind that feels unbearable. Because in that stillness, something ancient wakes up, something you've been distracting yourself from for years. You begin to realize that many of your decisions, what you studied, who you married, what you pursued, even what you feared, weren't made from freedom. They were made from a need to be desired, to be chosen, to not be forgotten, to not be invisible. Carl Jung understood this better than most. He didn't talk about sex as the world does. He wasn't interested in shock or scandal. He was interested in the truth behind the mask, the truth that most people spend a lifetime avoiding. He saw how even the most brilliant, accomplished, and spiritual individuals carried a wound. Not a wound of pain, but of separation, a separation from their own erotic energy, the force that gives color to life, the force that makes you not just survive, but feel, create, connect, awaken. And when that connection is lost, when you exile your eros, you don't become pure. You become fragmented. You stop creating from love. You start creating from emptiness. You become obsessed with being impressive, being safe, being above desire. And you tell yourself it's because you've matured. You haven't. You've just learned how to bury the parts of you that once scared you. But here's what no one tells you. That same part, the one you buried, is where your light lives. It's where your depth lives. It's where your power begins. You've been taught that sex is dangerous, that desire must be tamed, that passion must be redirected, contained, or denied altogether. But Jung saw eros as a sacred tool, not to be obeyed blindly, not to be repressed religiously, but to be integrated. Because when it isn't, it slips into everything. It wears disguises. It becomes ambition that never satisfies, creativity that burns you out, spirituality that feels fake, relationships that feel like performances, success that feels like an act. You can have all the right things, followers, money, health, love, and still feel like something is missing. That missing piece? It's not outside you. It's inside. It's the raw, wild, unfiltered part of you that has been asking, not to be unleashed, but to be seen, heard, acknowledged. The more you deny it, the more it shapes your fate, because this force, eros, is not just sexual. It is psychological, spiritual, symbolic. It is the archetype of life force itself, and when it is ignored, it doesn't disappear. It turns into anxiety, into control, into projection. Suddenly you hate in others what you cannot accept in yourself. You desire in others what you have silenced in your soul. And so you fall in love with mirrors, not people. You fall in love with the intensity they awaken in you, with the parts of you they allow you to feel again. But it doesn't last. Because the other person is not the source, they're the trigger. And when they leave, so does the feeling. So you chase it again, in someone else, in something else. This is the cycle of the unintegrated erotic self. It's not lust, it's not love, it's the ache of disconnection. And Jung believed that the only way out was in. Not by suppressing eros, not by obeying it blindly, but by walking with it, learning its language, understanding what it wants from you, not just physically but creatively, emotionally, spiritually. Because here's the secret. Eros isn't here to control you. It's here to awaken you. It's not the enemy. It's not a god. It's not something to worship or fear. It's a compass, pointing to the places within you that are still alive. And if you follow it consciously, it won't lead you into chaos. It will lead you home. But only if you're willing to face what you've been running from. Let's pause for a moment. Think about the people you've loved. Not the ones you liked. Not the ones who made sense on paper. But the ones who shook you. The ones who made you forget who you were pretending to be. The ones who made you feel alive. Why? Why them? Was it their personality, their values, their timing? Or was it something you couldn't explain? Something that pulled you in from somewhere deep inside? Carl Jung would say it wasn't love you felt at first. It was projection, not of fantasy, not of romance, but of your own shadow. A part of yourself you had lost, buried, silenced. And then suddenly there they were. Not as a savior but as a mirror. Because when eros is not integrated, it doesn't disappear. It looks for a face, a name, a story. It says there, that person, they're what I've been looking for. But it's never about them. It's about what they awaken in you. You don't fall for them. You fall for the part of you they allow you to remember. That's why the connection feels divine. That's why losing them feels like death. It's not just heartbreak. It's the reburial of a piece of your own soul. And this is where things get dangerous. Because the world will tell you to chase that high. To find another person who makes you feel that rush. To believe in soulmates and perfect timing, and twin flames. To romanticize your hunger instead of understanding it. But Jung's truth was colder and clearer. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. That means every time you fall for someone who destabilizes you, every time you sabotage something good to chase something intense, every time you confuse chaos for passion, it's not fate, it's your shadow, it's your unmet eros, disguised as destiny. So how do you break free? How do you stop being pulled into projections, into loops, into stories that look like love but feel like loss? So you start by taking eros off the pedestal. You stop worshipping it. You stop running from it. You stop using it as proof that something or someone is meant to be. Instead, you bring it home. You say to that part of you, I see you. I won't exile you anymore. But I also won't let you write every chapter of my life without me. Because here's the paradox. Eros, when unconscious, enslaves you. But eros, when conscious, frees you. It frees you from obsession, from manipulation, from the aching need to be completed by someone else. Because once you recognize that the thing you were chasing was never outside you, was never in them, you reclaim your power. You stop trying to be wanted. You start trying to be whole. And here's the twist. The moment you become whole, your relationships change. You stop attracting chaos. You stop projecting fantasy. You stop mistaking pain for passion. You begin to love not from lack, but from abundance. Not to fill a void, but to share a truth. Not to escape yourself, but to extend yourself. This is the gift of integration. But it's not easy. It means grieving the illusions. It means sitting with the loneliness you tried to numb. It means facing the truth that some of your deepest loves weren't about the other person at all. They were about waking up something in you that you hadn't dared to touch on your own. And once that truth hits you, once you feel the full weight of it, you will be tempted to run again. Don't stay. Let it burn. Let it strip you of the masks. Let it show you who you were, beneath the stories, the roles, the coping mechanisms. And then when the fire settles, something new emerges. Not a new partner, not a new obsession, but a new relationship with yourself. One that no longer begs to be seen. One that no longer needs to perform desire or prove worth. One that says, I am not the fragments others have projected onto me. I am the one who chooses what parts of me come forward. This is not about celibacy. It's not about indulgence. It's about awareness. Because once you awaken eros, you can finally stop being enslaved by it. You can walk with it, not as your master, not as your enemy, but as your guide. Let's go deeper. Because now we're past the surface, past the illusions of romance, the projections of love, the ego's desperate strategies to be seen. Now we're in the territory Jung warned us about. The point where eros, if not made conscious, becomes not just a shadow, but a system of control, of repression, of internal prisons passed down from generation to generation. This is where it stops being personal and starts being collective. You see, society doesn't just teach you to ignore eros. It depends on you doing it. It needs you to stay afraid of your power. Because a person who has integrated their erotic energy can't be manipulated by superficial rewards. They don't chase symbols. They don't crave permission. They don't collapse under guilt. They live from the inside out. And that, in a society built on performance and approval, is dangerous. So the culture gives you stories dressed as values. It tells you what's attractive, what's acceptable, what's shameful, what's too much, what's not enough. And if you don't fit, you feel wrong, you feel broken. But here's the truth. You were never broken. You were just never taught the full language of your psyche. Jung called this system the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of archetypes, myths, roles, fears, and within it is a mold, a cultural blueprint of how you're supposed to desire. You internalize that mold before you even know how to speak. And you spend your life trying to conform to it. Not because it's true, but because you're scared of what happens if you don't. But every time you contort yourself to fit it, you betray your soul a little more. You dress a certain way, not for expression, but for belonging. You pursue a relationship not for love, but for validation. You chase status, not for meaning, but to prove you're enough. And the worst part, you start to believe that's who you really are. But underneath all that, the soul resists, and it resists through symptoms: anxiety, burnout, depression, emotional numbness, sleeplessness, chronic dissatisfaction. These aren't problems, they're messages, cries from the exiled parts of you, parts that once carried eros in its purest form. Jung didn't see symptoms as failures, he saw them as the psyche trying to heal, trying to push what's unconscious to the surface, trying to break the spell of conformity. And the key to breaking that spell is simple, but not easy. You must begin to feel again, not perform feelings, not think about feelings, but actually feel the hunger, the ache, the longing, the buried rage, the shame you never named, the desire you once had to hide just to be accepted, because until you do, your life doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the system, to the roles, to the rules, to the unmet needs of your past. But once you feel it, truly without judgment, you begin to reclaim it. That's when everything changes. You stop seeing yourself as a character in someone else's script. You stop needing to be perfect. You stop needing to be good. You start needing to be real. And from that place something unexpected emerges: creativity, passion, power. Not power over others, but power within. The kind that doesn't beg or bargain or perform. The kind that simply is. This is the power of transmutation. Jung compared it to alchemy, the process of turning lead into gold. But he wasn't talking about metal. He was talking about you, the parts of you you've called ugly, shameful, too much. Those are your lead. And the moment you stop rejecting them and start working with them, they become your gold. But don't mistake this for self-indulgence. This isn't about giving in to every urge or chasing chaos. It's about transforming the energy behind the urge into awareness. That's the real magic. You don't destroy the fire, you learn how to hold it. And in holding it you begin to illuminate your path, not with the cold light of logic, but with the fierce, radiant clarity of a soul no longer at war with itself. This isn't a destination, it's a practice. Every day a choice. Do you perform, or do you show up? Do you repress, or do you listen? Do you run, or do you stand still and ask, what in me is trying to be seen? Because that question, that pause, is where healing begins. Not in the books, not in the gurus, not in the approval of the world, but right there, in the fire you've spent your whole life trying not to touch. By now you may be feeling something you can't quite name. Not fear, not clarity, not even discomfort. Something quieter, but heavier, like a truth rising from deep water, one you felt your entire life, but never had the words for. That truth is this: you've been living with a fire inside you, not chaos, not lust, not recklessness, but eros, the raw, creative, spiritual energy of your being. And almost no one ever taught you how to live with it. Not your parents, not your teachers, not your religion, not your society. They taught you how to be good, how to follow rules, how to fit into roles that made others comfortable, but they never taught you how to face your own intensity, how to stand in front of your inner fire without shame or fear. So what did you do? You learned to hide it, to dress it in achievement, to numb it with routine, to disguise it as ambition, spiritual discipline, or romantic longing. But eros is not a force that vanishes just because you pretend it isn't there. It waits. It waits in your relationships, where you fall too fast, too hard, then wonder why it all collapses. It waits in your creative blocks, where you feel empty, uninspired, cut off from purpose. It waits in your spiritual crises, when none of your beliefs can quiet the ache inside you. Jung saw this in almost every person he worked with: sophisticated, educated, even awakened, but underneath the surface, starving not for more knowledge or enlightenment, but for integration, for the return of the part of themselves they had sacrificed in order to belong. And this is where most people get stuck, because the world teaches us a deadly illusion, that growth means becoming someone better, that healing means becoming someone lighter, that maturity means outgrowing desire. But real transformation, it's not about becoming someone else, it's about returning to the parts of you were forced to abandon, the wild part, the sensual part, the part that loved deeply, felt fully, wanted without shame. And when you finally stop running from that part, when you turn toward it instead of away, something miraculous happens. You begin to feel whole, not perfect, not always peaceful, but whole. You begin to realize that the love you were begging others to give you was really the love you had been withholding from yourself, that the desire you projected onto others was really a map to the places inside you that had been frozen. And once you see this, truly see it, your entire relationship with life changes. You stop chasing people who mirror your wounds. You stop performing roles just to be accepted. You stop fearing your own depth, because now you've tasted truth. And once you do, you can never again survive on lies. But here's where the trap tightens, where most people fall into the final illusion. They awaken to their erotic power. They feel the fire. They integrate the shadow. And then they build a new identity around it. They say, I am free now. They say, I've transcended desire. They wear it like a badge, a brand, a title. But Jung warned us, this is just another mask, another persona, the spiritual ego. Because eros is not something you conquer. It's not something you use to feel superior. It's not another tool for control or performance. It is a presence to be honored daily, a force to be in relationship with, a fire to be fed, but never possessed. Real freedom isn't about declaring victory over desire. It's about learning how to walk beside it, without collapsing into it, and without banishing it into the dark. It's knowing when eros is speaking, and when it's time to listen. It's knowing when eros is screaming for healing, and when it's trying to lead you back to joy. You will never stop feeling. You will never stop desiring. But you can stop being owned by those feelings. You can stop outsourcing your power to lovers, to fantasies, to institutions, to roles that never fit your soul. And in that space between reaction and awareness, you will finally meet yourself. Not the version others shaped, not the version you invented for safety, but the you who's been whispering beneath the noise this whole time. Don't be afraid of your fire. That's where your freedom lives. You've made it this far. That already says something about you, something most people are too afraid to admit, that you're not just hungry for answers. You're hungry for truth. Even the kind that makes you uncomfortable. Even the kind that asks you to unravel everything you thought made you good. And now, standing at this edge, you face the question Jung devoted his life to helping others confront. Are you ready to stop being who you were told to be, and start becoming who you truly are? Not the curated version, not the overachiever, the people pleaser, the ascetic, the perfect partner, the one who's always okay, but the real you, the one with longing, with contradictions, with wildness and wisdom in the same breath. Because here's what no one tells you. You don't become powerful by pretending you've tamed your desire. You become powerful when you stop lying about it. Most people don't want that kind of power. They want approval. They want to be liked. They want to be desirable, without ever daring to ask why they crave being desired so badly. But if you look close enough, you'll see it. So much of what we chase, success, beauty, social worth, it's all a language of eros, a desperate attempt to feel seen. And Jung saw this with devastating clarity. He understood that when eros is repressed, it leaks, it floods your dreams with symbols you don't understand. It colors your relationships with projections you can't control. It saturates your ambitions with an urgency that never feels satisfied. Until eventually, the life you've built looks complete on the outside, but collapses on the inside. Because eros doesn't vanish. It waits, and it waits in silence. Until something breaks, or wakes you, a heartbreak, a burnout, a failure, a moment of silence too sharp to ignore. And in that moment, you hear something. Not a voice, not a message, but a pull, a shift, a realization that maybe, just maybe, what you were calling discipline was actually self-abandonment. That what you thought was emotional control was emotional distance. That what you thought was being morally good was being spiritually numb. This is the awakening Jung called individuation. Not a path toward perfection, but toward integration, toward reclaiming the parts of you you left behind to survive. The sensual part, the rebellious part, the feeling part, the child who once wanted love without having to earn it, the teen who wanted touch without shame, the adult who wanted to stop performing and finally just be. Eros is not your enemy. It's not the thing dragging you into chaos. It's the guide trying to lead you out of it. But here's the paradox. To follow that guide, you must walk into the very places you've been avoiding. You must look at what you desire, not to act on all of it, but to understand all of it. Because behind every desire is a message, and behind every suppressed desire is a fear. A fear that you'll be rejected if you show who you really are. A fear that you'll be punished for wanting too much. A fear that if you touch your truth, your entire life might fall apart. And maybe it will. But maybe that's not a loss. Maybe that's liberation. Because what's the cost of keeping everything intact, if what remains is a life that doesn't even feel like yours? Jung never promised that facing Eros would be easy. He said it would be honest. That it would hurt. That it would demand the death of your false self. But after that death comes something else. Something real. A self that is not bound by roles. A self that does not need to seduce, prove or suppress. A self that can walk into any room, not trying to be desired, but already whole. That self isn't found in books. It's not found in the eyes of your next obsession. It's not found in retreats or rituals or routines. It's found in the part of you that never stopped whispering, "Let me exist. Let me feel. Let me be part of your truth." That's Eros. Not chaos. Not temptation. Not danger. But the pulse of life you've spent years trying to tame instead of listen to. And now you're here. No more running. No more performing. Just this question. Can you finally sit with the fire inside you, without flinching? Let's be honest. There's a part of you that's still hoping this journey leads to a clear answer. A clean resolution. A neat ending. A final step where everything suddenly makes sense and feels safe again. But that's not how awakening works. Carl Jung never promised comfort. He promised clarity. And clarity, as you've felt by now, is rarely gentle. It doesn't soothe. It exposes. It shows you how much of your life has been shaped not by freedom, but by avoidance. Avoidance of desire. Avoidance of discomfort. Avoidance of your own depth. But here's the truth that lives at the center of everything we've said so far. You will never become who you truly are by denying the part of you that longs, aches, wants. Desire isn't a distraction from your path. It is the path. Not because every desire should be obeyed, but because every desire should be understood. Most people live like caged animals wearing suits. They go to work. They smile for the camera. They do what's expected. But inside they are starving. Starving for aliveness. Starving for truth. Starving for intimacy. That isn't transactional or strategic, but soul-deep, terrifyingly honest and sacred. And that hunger doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're awake. But here's where most people fall into the trap one final time. They think, okay, I get it. I've seen the truth. I'll integrate my Eros. I'll be more honest with myself. But what they really do is swap one mask for another. They take off the mask of repression and put on the mask of spiritual superiority. They start talking about consciousness, inner work, energy alignment. But underneath it all, they're still running. Still using language and labels to avoid feeling the raw pulse of who they are. Jung warned us, the psyche is cunning. The ego will do anything to avoid annihilation, even if it means pretending to have transcended desire. But the moment you believe you've mastered Eros, is the moment it masters you again. just in a subtler disguise. So how do you stay free? Not once, but every day. You stop trying to win. You stop trying to transcend. You stop trying to be above the very thing that gives your life its color, its texture, its electricity. And instead you become willing to walk beside it, to let eros whisper, not scream, to let desire speak, not dictate. That's what Jung meant by integration. It's not an event. It's a relationship. And relationships require honesty. Which means asking yourself the questions most people are too afraid to face. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I want? Not what I should want. Not what they told me to want. But what my soul whispers for in the dark. What would I create if I wasn't scared of being seen? Who would I love if I wasn't performing worthiness? These questions aren't easy, but they are the beginning of everything. Because once you stop performing and start listening, you begin to make room for a different kind of power. Not the power to control others, but the power to stop betraying yourself. To say yes I want, yes I feel, yes I long. And to know that those confessions don't make you weak, they make you real. That's the paradox of eros. It humbles you and empowers you. It dissolves the illusion of control and offers you something far greater. Connection to yourself, to others, to life. But only if you stop looking for quick fixes. Only if you let go of the idea that healing means purging your wildness. Healing, in its truest form, means reclaiming it. It means remembering that there is nothing shameful about desire. Not when it's conscious. Not when it's rooted in truth. Not when it's guided by self-awareness. Instead of fear. You're not here to be a monk unless your soul calls for silence. You're not here to be a lover unless your heart can hold vulnerability. You're not here to be anything the world wants you to be. You're here to remember the parts of yourself you were told to hide, and bring them home. You're here to stop apologizing for your depth, to stop shrinking around people who are still asleep, to stop trading your aliveness for safety. Because safety without truth isn't peace, it's numbness. And you weren't born to go numb. You were born to feel, to burn, to create, to become. So ask yourself, when was the last time you felt truly alive? Not because of something you achieved, but because of something you remembered. That's eros. That's the moment you stopped being a character and started being the author. So now we arrive at the end, or maybe the beginning. Because if you've truly heard what was spoken here, if it sank into you like a quiet knife through fog, you know something has changed. Not outside, inside. Not in how the world sees you, but in how you can no longer see yourself the same. You can't go back to calling your hunger shame. You can't pretend your ache is weakness. You can't unknow the fire in your chest that isn't here to destroy you, but to show you who you were before the world asked you to be smaller. Carl Jung didn't give us a set of rules. He gave us mirrors. And if you've looked into those mirrors, truly looked, you've likely seen things you weren't ready for. Desire you denied. Feelings you buried. Needs you shamed. Versions of yourself you abandoned long ago. And maybe for the first time in your life, you realize it was never about sex. It was about truth. It was about the way truth hides behind our most feared impulses. The way it disguises itself as longing, as projection, as obsession. The way it asks to be held, not corrected, not condemned, but seen. Eros is not a force to be solved. It is a force to be lived, to be respected, engaged, and integrated. You don't need to act on every impulse. You don't need to express every thought, but you must make space for what those parts of you are trying to say. Because when you don't, when you keep pushing it away, you fracture. You become a stranger to your own body. You begin to mistake numbness for peace. You start to call obedience wisdom, and silence maturity. But the soul knows. It always knows. And it keeps speaking, even when you stop listening. In the quiet panic before sleep. In the deep sadness that has no name. In the dreams that make no sense yet leave you shaken. That's your unconscious asking, will you finally come back to me? You see, this isn't a war between logic and passion. It's not purity versus temptation. It's wholeness versus fragmentation. And most people, Most brilliant, capable, well-meaning people live in fragments. Not because they're broken, but because they've never been told they can gather their pieces and still be loved. You can, but you must stop lying to yourself. You must stop pretending that what you want doesn't matter, that what you feel can be ignored forever, that being chosen is more important than being yourself. Because if you keep trading authenticity for acceptance, one day you'll wake up in a life that fits like a costume. And by then you'll have forgotten how to take it off. Don't let it get there. You don't need to burn your world down. You just need to start telling the truth, to yourself first. The truth about what you feel. The truth about what you want. The truth about what you've been hiding. Because when you do, something opens. The ache softens. The projections fade. The hunger begins to transform. Desire stops owning you and starts guiding you. That's the beauty of Eros. When it's no longer repressed, it becomes light. It energizes your art, your relationships, your spirituality. It helps you create, not chase. It helps you build, not beg. It helps you meet the world, not as someone performing, but as someone present. This is not a quick fix. This is not a path for the faint-hearted, but it is a path for those who are done pretending, for those who would rather feel everything than feel nothing, who would rather face themselves in the mirror than keep hiding behind masks, who would rather burn with truth than sleep inside a lie. So if that's you, if something in this stirred a place in you that's been silent for too long, I invite you to say it aloud, right now, wherever you are. My shadow no longer scares me, not because it's gone, but because now you've met it, and now the work begins. Not to eliminate it, but to walk with it, to listen, to grow, to create, to love. Not from fear, not from need, but from wholeness. Welcome to yourself.